Early in the morning on the Atchafalaya Basin, a motorboat moves smoothly across the water. Just 18 months earlier, this section of river was a solid green mat of vegetation. Boat engines got stuck. The swamp no longer looked like water, only weeds. But today, the water surface is completely open. The United States spent more than $120 million in just one state, and spent more than a century using every possible method, chemicals, dredging machines, and even explosives to clear this plant. But what removed the floating mat from the river was not humans at all. The way this plant took over America, and then slowly disappeared, contains one of the strangest efforts in history. In 1884, New Orleans hosted the World Cotton Centennial. Among hundreds of exhibition booths, there was a small pond displaying a plant native to the Amazon River basin in South America. It produced pale purple flowers with a single yellow spot on one petal. The organizers gave this plant away for free to visitors to take home as decoration. Fairgoers carried it to Florida, Texas, and other southern states. They placed this plant into ponds and lakes without knowing the truth about its reproductive mechanism. Water hyacinth does not need to wait for a seed season. It clones itself. One plant grows a runner. And from that runner, a young plant appears, identical to the parent. The young plant immediately continues the same process. Field data show that under enough sunlight and water, a mat of water hyacinth can double its area in only 6 to 12 days. A single plant can cover 200 square meters of water surface after 1 year. People's ornamental ponds quickly became packed full. Gardeners scooped out the excess and dumped it into natural streams. By 1895, it had spread across Florida's waterways. By 1904, the plant had appeared in California. A decorative landscape flower had grown into a massive body of plant matter that blocked entire waterways. This spread did not stop at physical obstruction. The plant itself carried a mechanism of serious ecological decline that took experts decades to fully measure. In the early 1900s, steamboats traveling on southern rivers were forced to stop operating. Waterways that had remained open for 50 years were completely blocked. Dense mats of hyacinth covered the surface, blocked all sunlight, and reduced the amount of dissolved oxygen in the water. Fish could not survive at the river bottom. Stagnant water allowed millions of mosquitoes to reproduce. The enormous weight of thousands of tons of plants drifting with the current damaged the structure of many concrete bridge piers. This plant grows especially strongly under human influence. Wastewater from sewers, agricultural fertilizer, and industrial waste flowing into rivers created an abundant supply of nutrients. Unlike ordinary plants, water hyacinth absorbs these nutrients to accelerate its cloning speed. It can grow normally even in water polluted with heavy metals, such as lead or mercury. Globally, this plant once covered Lake Victoria in Africa in the 1990s, reducing local fish catches by 70% and paralyzing the transportation routes of 3 countries. In the United States, riverside property values fell sharply. Waterway trade stalled. The U.S. Congress recognized the emergency and assigned the task to the force that had once controlled the flow of the Mississippi River, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. But even large-scale mechanized methods could not solve a plant that clones itself. The military sent mechanical harvesters into the water. They used chains to pull mats of hyacinth onto the shore. In heavily blocked sections of river, they used shockwave technology to break apart the vegetation layer. They burned it with fire. But water hyacinth grew back faster than machines could clear it. Later, herbicides were used continuously every year. In Louisiana alone, from 1975 to 2013, the government spent $124 million on chemicals to kill hyacinth. Although expensive, chemicals could only manage small areas and could not eliminate it completely. Helplessness against this plant led to a real event in 1910. At that time, the United States faced a double crisis. Rivers were covered with water, hyacinth, and there was a serious shortage of beef. Grazing land was running out, causing meat prices to soar. Congressman Robert Broussard stood before the House Agriculture Committee and submitted House Bill number 23,261. The plan was clear: America would import hippos from Africa and release them freely into the swamps of Louisiana. The hippos would consume tons of water hyacinth every day. Once they became fat, Americans would harvest them as a food source. Newspapers at the time gave this new food a name: Lake Cow Bacon. The bill requested a budget of $250,000. Former President Theodore Roosevelt publicly supported it. Supporters argued that cattle, sheep, and horses were all imported animals that lived well in America. So there was no reason hippos would fail. No one cared that hippos are among the most dangerous animals in Africa, creating a greater threat to human life than even lions. But the most remarkable truth was not about the hippos. It was about the people brought in to defend this bill before Congress. To persuade politicians, Broussard hired 2 Africa experts to testify. One was Frederick Russell Burnham, a famous scout. The second was named Fritz Joubert Duquesne. The US government's desperation to solve the water hyacinth problem was so great that it did not investigate the backgrounds of these men. Decades later, the Federal Bureau of Investigation finally revealed Fritz Duquesne's true identity. He was not just a hunter, but a global-level spy. During World War II, Duquesne became the leader of a large foreign intelligence network that was later convicted in the United States. The Hippo import plan that year was actually an opportunity for Duquesne to gain access to funding sources and senior officials. America nearly handed a massive budget to a foreign spy, just to buy a dangerous animal to fight a flower. The bill almost passed. But World War I broke out and changed the priorities of Congress. The cattle industry also found cheaper production methods. The Hippo plan was cancelled, leaving water hyacinth to continue growing for decades. However, while humans tried every possible way to control it from the outside, there were geographic limits that the plant itself could never cross. Originating from the Amazon rainforest, water hyacinth has one physiological barrier that cannot be changed: it cannot survive freezing temperatures. A harsh frost completely breaks down its cell structure. Throughout the 20th century, this plant repeatedly invaded northward, drifting along rivers into areas such as New York, Missouri, and Kentucky. Each time, the first winter arrived and wiped out the entire water hyacinth population. Today, ecological data show that water hyacinth has been completely eliminated in states such as Washington, Arizona, and Arkansas. Winter performs the job of cleaning water surfaces for free across the entire northern half of the United States every year. This is the hard boundary line on the map where the plant is stopped. But in the warm southern half, where ice and snow do not exist, water hyacinth continues to grow powerfully. Many people wonder, if this plant grows so quickly and for free, why not harvest it to make furniture, produce biogas, or create large-scale livestock feed? Why not even turn it into a billion-dollar industry? Technical analyses show that water hyacinth is up to 95% water and only 5% dry matter. To obtain 5 tons of dry material for fertilizer production or weaving, you would have to scoop up, transport, and evaporate 100 tons of fresh hyacinth. The fuel cost for excavators and trucks, plus the energy required for drying, is many times higher than the value of the final product. In the 2000s, many countries from Asia to Southern Europe experimented with building plants to process water hyacinth into biogas. All of them closed after a few years because they lost money. No economic system can sustain the enormous cost of moving and heating thousands of tons of water. When commercial markets and industrial machines could not solve the problem, the answer for the warm waters of the South appeared in the form of creatures only a few millimeters long. In 1972, after multiple rounds of quarantine, American scientists released a small grayish-brown weevil into the waters of Broward County, Florida. It was a Neochetina weevil, about 3.5 millimeters long, originally from Argentina. For millions of years in its South American homeland, this insect had one biological habit: consuming water hyacinth. This is the mechanism of co-evolution. Water hyacinth in South America does not become a disaster because it is continuously controlled by a system of native natural enemies. In 1884, when water hyacinth arrived in America, it brought no insects with it. Without natural enemies, it grew out of control. The power of natural enemies was proven most clearly at Lake Victoria in Africa in the late 90s, when a 12,000-hectare hyacinth mat crippled Uganda's hydroelectric turbines. Every mechanical effort was useless. But, after millions of South American weevils were released into the lake, 90% of the hyacinth mat was cleared out in only 3 years. The power grid lit up again. A national energy crisis was solved by tiny living creatures. In the United States, the arrival of the weevil from Argentina immediately changed field data. Female weevils lay about 400 eggs inside water hyacinth leaf tissue. When the eggs hatch, the larvae drill straight into the stem and base of the plant, hollowing out the water-conducting tissues from the inside. A hyacinth mat attacked by this insect loses more than half its mass and loses 97% of its ability to flower and reproduce. The plant's recovery rate cannot keep up with the reproduction and consumption rate of the weevil larvae. After the first release, from 1977 to 2010, the United States continued releasing 3 other insect species, a stem-boring moth and a sap-sucking bug. Together, all 4 species created constant pressure on the vegetation mat. The ecological picture in Gulf Coast rivers gradually became complete when native species began to join the feast. Giant half-ton manatees in Florida and schools of grass carp treated water hyacinth as an abundant food source. This pincer attack, with insects chewing and hollowing it from the inside, while herbivores trimmed it from the outside, completely broke the dominance of this invasive plant. In Florida, water hyacinth is now classified under maintenance control. That means it still exists, but only in small clusters. It no longer has the ability to cover rivers in a thick, solid mass the way it once did. This is not the first time nature has taught humans a lesson about balance. When invasive rabbits exploded across Australia, or when destructive fungi invaded European forests, the most complete and sustainable solution always came from restoring the chain of natural enemies, not from brutal human intervention. For more than 100 years, humanity has favored the mindset of using muscle to force nature into submission. Bigger machines, more toxic chemicals, more terrifying explosives. But the water hyacinth story exposed the fatal flaw in that thinking. Against an ecological machine capable of cloning itself without limit, human money and mechanical force will always run out first. While nature never gets tired, back on the river stretch in the Atchafalaya Basin, the still black water reflects the cypress trees. The motorboat moves smoothly back to the dock, without hitting a single obstacle. A few small purple flower clusters drift along the riverbank. After more than 100 years of burning through hundreds of millions of dollars, throwing explosives into the water, and nearly turning the swamp into a hippo farm, America was finally rescued. The miracle did not come from weapons or technology. It came from a wave of cold air, 3 insect species smaller than grains of rice, and herds of manatees chewing plants beneath the river. A century-long war ended quietly the moment humans accepted letting go of force and allowing nature to clean up its own battlefield.